Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from today. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our webinar titled Staying Ahead in Financial Services Through Virtual Selling. My name is Marcus Westling. I'm a key account manager in LinkedIn Sales Solutions business based here out of Singapore. And it's my pleasure to be your host and moderator for today. Very excited to be joined by three talented professionals and leaders from ICICI Bank, HSBC Sri Lanka, and LinkedIn. For our fireside chat, we're joined today by Anupam Verma, CEO Singapore and Regional Head Southeast Asia for ICICI Bank, and Taranga Gunasekera, Head of Marketing and Communications for HSBC Sri Lanka. We'll be getting their perspective on the digital evolution of their organizations and of the finance industry itself. We're also joined today by Kenny Pang, who's a Senior Relationship Manager with LinkedIn Sales Solutions, also based here in Singapore. Now, before we begin, a few quick housekeeping items. On the On24 webinar platform, there is a Q&A chat box open throughout the webinar. If at any time you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in there, and we'll do our best to get to those questions at the end of the session. Also, if you're experiencing any audio video issues, please first just try refreshing your browser, and that should solve the issue. With that, let's get to the agenda for the day. So we'll start off with the fireside chat with Anupam and Taranga, where we'll spend about 20-25 minutes getting their perspective on the topic. Then I'll share some perspective around the key trends, challenges, and opportunities for the finance industry here in APAC. And finally, Kenny will take us through some useful tips on how to use LinkedIn and Sales Navigator specifically to move ahead of the competition before we close off with any questions. So on that note, let's dive into our fireside chat. Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Excellent. Well, to start things off, Anupam, Taranga, I'd like to pass the mic over to you guys to introduce yourselves and your organizations. And I must warn you, we do have a tradition here at LinkedIn where we'd also ask you to share something about yourselves that is not on your LinkedIn profile. So, Taranga, perhaps would you like to start first?
Yeah, hi Marcus. Great to be taking part in this fireside chat, and thank you for the invitation. So I work for HSBC Sri Lanka, and I've also had a couple of stints overseas, especially in HSBC India and Indonesia. I've been with the bank for almost 15 years. I currently head marketing and corporate communications for the bank, and I think basically have been involved in a lot of the work that has been happening here locally in terms of transformation for digital. And I think basically the bank is quite focused on getting the transformation up to speed. I think we started the journey much before ahead of time before the pandemic. Something that you probably might not be aware is I do spend a lot of time playing golf, and I also do a lot of junior golf development in Sri Lanka. So something maybe for you to think about. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Anupam, over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thanks, Marcus. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Anupam Verma. I head Southeast Asia business for ICICI Bank. Been with the bank for 20 plus years. Almost 15 years in Mumbai and last 6 years in Singapore. In Singapore, in Southeast Asia, we have 4 businesses. NRI, private banking and retail, MNC in corporate, institutional, as well as trade finance. Something which is not there about me on the LinkedIn. I love reading, I love playing tennis, and I love singing.
Fantastic to hear. Thank you so much for sharing. And excellent backgrounds from both of you, and looking forward to the discussion today. So let's jump in. Starting at a very high level, I guess, we've all seen that 2020 was really a year where organizations across industries, not just in FS, but truly across industries, really pivoted to this more digital approach. Given that both of you are veterans in your respective organizations, Anupam with, I think you said 20, 21 years of service at ICICI, and Taranga, I believe, with 15 years at HSBC. Really curious to know how much of a role did COVID play in the transformation to a more digital approach? Did it accelerate a path you were already on, or was it a trigger that made you realize it was time to really transform? And secondly, how far along would you say you are on that journey today? Anupam, perhaps we can start with you on this one.
Sure. ICICI Bank has always been at the forefront of technology innovation. So our journey for providing frictionless, paperless, simple and convenient customer experience started much earlier. COVID definitely has accelerated the process for us. But at the same time, actually it is turbocharged the scale and scope of technology adoption by the customers. So we use this time to virtually handhold our customers during this transition. We also had to ensure that our digital infrastructure remains scalable, resilient, and secure as the demand increases multifold. We launched new services like video KYC, WhatsApp banking. Bank also launched iStart, a program which enables startups to open a current account completely digitally and virtually at the time of their incorporation with the help of API integration with the relevant government department. So our startup is ready virtually and digitally to do business on day one. In Singapore, the usage of our digital remittance platform, Money to India, has been going up. We launched virtual banking in Singapore, which allows customers to engage with us and with the RMs on video at the time and place of their choice. So there are multiple use cases. Today, for example, 90% of our personal loans and almost 80% of our credit cards are sourced digitally. Where are we on the journey? Very interesting question. Totally today, if you look at the landscape, you have digitally savvy customers which are demanding more and more experiments. This is motivating banks like us to reimagine delivery of both articulated and unarticulated customer needs. So yes, it's still work in progress and we have distance to cover. Another thing I would like to add, this journey cannot be covered alone. Banks must have a gene of partnership in their DNA. The role of partnership with fintechs and big techs will play a very important role for banks to succeed in this journey and reach the finish line.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Sounds like lots of innovation happened over the last year, lots of proactive innovation. I love the word partnerships across the broader ecosystem, which will help generate a lot of that. Taranga, how about yourself?
Yeah, Marcus. So I think, as you probably are already aware, so HSBC does have a massive ambition in terms of transforming our business to become more digitally savvy. And this is something that we started many, many years ago. I think basically it came in various forms. We are investing in our infrastructure development. We are investing in the capability and making customer journey simpler. And I think basically the kind of whole proposition that we are trying to achieve was what we call a mobile-centered smart banking. I mean, that was kind of the overarching theme that we worked on. This is much before the pandemic really hit us. But I think basically what happened during the pandemic is obviously something that kind of, as Anupam alluded to, basically we had a massive, kind of take up or adoption of digital because simply by the lack of choice. And I think we do kind of focus on very digitally savvy customers in the country anyway. And I think our ambition was to kind of, support customers to kind of do their banking on the go, move money, make payments, and also transfer funds using mobile banking platforms. So basically, we were, kind of supporting the, on-the-go banking, and of course, we're looking at how we can bring the bank essentially into their homes much before the pandemic hit. But what I can say is, when with the pandemic, I think basically it got dialed up, and what we are now looking at is how can we, as the leading international bank that has been in Sri Lanka for over 128 years, put the bank in the pocket of our customers. So that is kind of the overarching ambition that we are working towards, and I can say that it has really paid dividends post the lockdown, because of the sheer kind of heightened awareness that you got to do things
Yeah.
differently.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I liked how you were, taking a very customer driven approach and a very buyer first type of approach with the hand holding and guiding your clients and customers through that journey. And you're right. I think we're all kind of at the early stages of a very accelerated path. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where the road leads for all of us. Now, we talked about innovation, we talked about new opportunities. It sounded very nice and rosy and lots of good things happening, but I'm sure it wasn't that easy. Any major challenges, maybe one major challenge that you faced, Anupam, and then I can share a little bit what we've heard as well.
Yeah. So, when it comes to large banks, I always say legacy technology is not a constraint, but legacy mindset can be.
Absolutely.
Today customer is not looking at products and channels, but a seamless experience to fulfill the financial need. So as a result, banks need to have customer first, banking later approach and mindset. Two very important aspects here: leadership and culture. Leadership sets the agenda, and culture allows you to experiment and fail. Right leadership also believes in, as I said earlier, you don't have to build everything yourself, and create strong foundation for partnerships in the larger ecosystem. At ICICI Bank, we are quite fortunate to have the right leadership and culture. With that, the larger team is always learning and getting insights about the skills and technology playbook required to serve the customer of tomorrow, be it experience design, whether it's data analytics, AI, ML, cloud, or virtual client engagement in the remote everything world. At the end of the day, the banks have to believe that they have to be a tech company to survive and thrive in this competitive world. Eventually, it's only the customer experience which matters. Banking has to be invisible and embedded in the customer experience.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I mean, we've really heard that idea around mindsets as being a big challenge. Oftentimes we place a lot of emphasis on the skill sets, which are obviously critically important, but oftentimes shaping the mindsets and changing the mindsets of those, as you put it, legacy mindsets is certainly critical.
Marcus, I'm currently reading Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella, who has been credited with transformation at Microsoft.
Oh, okay.
And he talks
Great choice.
and he talks about growth mindset. How do you think about the opportunity? How do you learn from failure? How do you create an environment where people can take risk and you create a safety net? So very inspiring.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head with leadership and culture. And we're fortunate at Satya's guidance and leadership around both of those within the broader Microsoft ecosystem. Taranga, curious from your perspective at HSBC Sri Lanka, one, have you felt that same need to kind of shift mindsets internally? And how can you go about doing that, whether it's at the relationship manager level or at the leadership level? Is there anything specific you've done to help shift those mindsets or those legacy mindsets, as Anupam put it? Taranga, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Marcus, I'm kind of delighted to say, I mean, when this whole pandemic hit, it was obviously something sudden onset. So we kind of had to do things differently, I'm sure, as Anupam also alluded to. So what I can share is, how we kind of went about the whole process. So we kind of followed a simple process, and that is to make sure that obviously that we support our customers throughout this whole challenging time. So what we basically did was we looked at it in three phases. The first phase was we basically obviously had to kind of understand the challenges of the customers, and this is what we call the respond phase. So we had to respond to kind of the challenges of the customers. I mean, obviously they had issues around. I'll give you an example. So in Sri Lanka, suddenly all the shops were closed, and everyone kind of either had to use credit cards or cash. And imagine when there's a lockdown, you can't access cash, a withdrawal of cash, or you obviously have to, make sure that the merchants have a credit card machine. So we kind of had to, understand these challenges. So this is basically the first, part of the journey. Then we had to kind of react to it. And essentially, what we did was we obviously have different segments of customers we deal with. There's one particular challenge for a segment of customers, which is what we call the more established elite. They're not very digital savvy, especially when it comes to high net worth, so on. But they had to overcome the same challenges. So what we did was we had a series of educational efforts to kind of educate them in terms of how they can transition into more digital payments, how to move money, how to make their payments, how to set up payment beneficiaries on their mobile banking. So we got the RMs to kind of take them, handhold them, and train them. So that was the second phase. And finally, we also kind of moved into what we call rebuild. So in the rebuild phase, we obviously kind of got the customers to adopt this as the new normal and further consolidate what they're doing in terms of digital transformation. So having said that, I think historically we've also kind of invested a lot of our marketing dollars on more digital onboarding, digital servicing, and obviously we use our social media platforms to connect with our customers. So we've already kind of got the infrastructure in place, the ecosystem was set. But when the pandemic hit, it was about kind of dialing it up and making sure that we leveraged on it more.
I love it. And so taking a very structured approach really to making sure that you're solving the actual needs in real time that customers are facing. And I think the underlying theme there really was around being customer first and listening to their needs in real time and having that culture again internally to be able to adapt and pivot as quickly as possible for the new reality or the new world in which we're operating in. Thank you both for sharing on that. Now, maybe switch gears a little bit, but very targeted towards your industries. Obviously quite regulated, quite compliance driven. When it comes to interacting online, at least, and on platforms like LinkedIn, I'm just curious, how do you create a balance where your commercial teams and your leaders even have the freedom to utilize and engage on platforms like LinkedIn, while still making sure that they stay in line with the corporate guidelines that you have in place? How do you meet that balance? Anupam, perhaps to you this time.
Yeah. Banks are custodians of customer trust. So it's very imperative that we manage aspects of privacy, security, fairness, and transparency in a responsible manner. Our bank, like all other banks, also has social media guidelines and the framework for employees to manage their presence online. Having said that, social media platforms are today an integral part of our professional lives, and they also offer high impact opportunity for B2B and private banking, B2C relationship management. Taking an example of LinkedIn, it provides a good platform for the bank to showcase specific innovative solutions and partnerships for a more targeted audience. And also all organizations eventually are made up of individuals. So before engaging with the CFO for an MNC client or a wealth client, it helps the team members to understand the CFO's profile, background, experience. All these insights make the engagement very, very meaningful and relevant. You briefly talked about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. In the beginning, it's a great sales management platform which commercial teams can use to engage clients responsibly. It helps targeting well out of access network connections. It gives insights to RM on a regular basis to create a more meaningful win-win relationship. We have started using it recently, and the team is quite finding it quite useful. This is what we call internally building human touch relationships powered by smart technology tools.
I love that. It's at the end of the day, we're just people talking to people, right? And people trying to add value to other people. And so you're right. The technology is the underlying system there to support us and driving that productivity. But it's important not to lose that human element. Taranga, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, so Marcus, I think basically we've seen some kind of we've kind of seen a different steer in terms of who we are targeting, and basically I mean if you look at the whole kind of how we kind of want to engage our customers. So I think the process we simply follow is that how do we kind of prime the customers, how do we engage them, and how do you convert them. So if you look at these three phases, I believe that all the digital social media platforms have really supported especially banks and financial service providers to really support us on the first aspect, which is more priming. So we kind of feel that we kind of felt that using all the social media platforms really helped us to prime customers to create awareness, educate them, and get them to kind of notice what's on offer. And of course, having said that, it doesn't really kind of stop there. It obviously goes to in terms of engagement and obviously conversion. And the beauty of it is, unlike the traditional media, everything we do can be measured. So that's kind of a discipline, especially all marketing teams are now adopting, because what gets done is what gets measured, and essentially that really is kind of the pivot towards more digital social kind of platform, especially I would say to prime and engage.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And 100% agree. It's important to measure that activity, measure the reaction from customers and clients and how they engage. In fact, on that note, how have your clients or your customers responded to this more digital push or just digital style of engagement from your teams, whether it's marketing or whether it's sales? Um, how have they reacted to that? And has there been a big difference from the consumer customers versus the corporate customers? Taranga, maybe over to you first now.
Yeah, so if you take HSBC Sri Lanka, we predominantly have two core products. One is a credit card, and other obviously is the more emerging affluent product, high net worth product that we offer, which is HSBC Premier. So if you look at both these segments, I would say that especially credit cards. I mean, we were the first to kind of go on a more digital onboarding platform in the country, understanding, and lifting and shifting a lot of the best practices from all our other markets. So when we kind of adopted this onboarding strategy, I think we kind of slowly evolved from about 5% to about 15% of all onboarding happening through the digital channels now. And I think basically what it does is two things. One, it gives us a huge amount of test and learn capabilities, and I think we kind of see it immediately either working or not working, so you can fail fast and move on. I think that's a fantastic capability that obviously that this whole digital social has given us. And the second aspect obviously is in terms of making it convenient for customers. I think end of the day we all exist to kind of support the customer needs and ensure that they get products and services quite quickly. And especially when it comes to credit cards, sometimes credit cards are required within a very fast pace environment. So what the digital kind of services and social media services have given us is that capability to support their needs fast and more conveniently. And as I said, get that bank in the pocket fast as probably possible and get them to start banking.
Absolutely. And so a strong reaction, it sounds like, as long as you're very customer focused and really adding value around their needs and their speed and their ability to react. Anupam, I'm curious on your side. I mean, you look after probably the most diverse region in the world around Southeast Asia. Have you seen a differing reaction from customers across the market, or what's your experience been?
So I think there's a consistency. The response from customers has been thumping yes across geographies and across customer segments. Taranga talked about the digital onboarding, digital fulfillment, digital servicing. That of course is has kind of given a lot of comfort to the customers. But on top of that, if you look at the broader digital approach to relationship building, it is convenient and of course safe during the current COVID times. Meetings are easy to schedule, saves on time, travel cost, and has better carbon footprints, if I can use that word. You can get different teams across geographies to collaborate virtually with the client to solve the problem, and the time for solving the problem is much shorter than what used to be in pre-COVID times. In fact, banks are now redesigning the workflows for different offerings with an assumption that clients and employees will be working from home, and this is leading to amazing results for the customers as well as for the bank. I think for both retail and corporate bank and corporate side, they are moving much faster than before. How I look at it that is that at the end of the day, it is all about building customer trust. And our experience has been that digital tools of relationship building are actually helping, and they go a long way in creating that customer trust.
Marcus, if I can add something, yeah, on the more B2B side, I think I couldn't add that on. Basically, over the years, we've kind of, had these multiple forums where we bring experts from our, group and leverage on some of the expertise and
Yeah,
share that information and advise customers over the years. And I can say that we completely converted into webinars and Zoom sessions. And what we've seen is the kind of take up has probably been better or the same. So this is more from a B2B perspective. So obviously,
yeah.
it's it's probably the information that's important. The delivery is probably the next kind of item on the agenda, I guess, in terms of selecting a mode of engagement. So I guess it has really helped us to kind of continue the legacy that we have built, the positioning we have kind of adopted, and also to do the continue the good work that we are doing in the market to kind of get customers up to speed on information.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. And that brings us kind of to the last question or theme I wanted to ask on for both of you. And both of you kind of alluded it to kind of around what does the future look like when it comes to virtual selling, when it comes to the working environment that we're going to be in. We're seeing vaccine rollouts accelerate around the world, and hopefully we'll find some level of normalcy in the months ahead. But how far do you see the pendulum swinging back, if at all? Or do you think digital selling is here to stay? And perhaps lastly, what's the one piece of advice you would share to your peers, other FS leaders going through a transformation like this? Anupam, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, Marcus, I'm fully convinced that the digital selling is here to stay. I already mentioned the benefits earlier. Moreover, organizations are actually today moving towards providing an omni-channel experience to the customers, and digital selling will be an integral part of providing this experience. So, sales model will become hybrid, where the commercial team would engage with the customers through video, phones, apps, and if I look at the future, even AR, VR, and supplemented by the in-person visits. On top of that, these digital sales model will be integrated with the CRMs, so that at all point of time, the relationship manager has a full 360-degree view and profile of the customer to make the engagement more meaningful. One piece of advice, I said earlier, digital tools will augment and support a more relevant engagement. However, we have to keep the human touch and empathy at the front and center of our relationship building, which will help us identify and fulfill customer needs and also create a long-term engagement.
Absolutely right. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right about the CRM as well. And you brought up Sales Navigator earlier. That syncs up with CRM as well, like Dynamics, to build that ecosystem around how you add value to customers. And critically important. And again, you brought up the human touch. That's important. Empathy, critical to getting this right. So thank you for sharing your thoughts there. Taranga, over to you. How far do you see it swinging back? And what's your one piece of advice?
I think, Marcus, we've already started the journey even before the pandemic hit. As many organizations have done that. I don't think there is any organization that has not adopted some of the digital prospecting tools. So if you look at digital selling, I think we got to look at it in terms of, okay, how do you prospect? How do you kind of onboard, and how do you fulfill, or basically, if I may call it, more life cycle management post your onboarding. So basically, I think all these three things have been made easier by some of these digital channels. So I don't see how I mean, obviously we've always had this conversation around what is your composition of offline and online. That has kind of been pivoting more towards online over the years. I don't see us really going back to a offline conversation because the prospecting now can be done with most of the tools available through digital means, and onboarding obviously through the online customer journeys, and even lifecycle management and deepening loyalty and relationships through digital tools. So I don't really see us going back to a more offline conversation or if I may call it a more face to face. But I would think that certain segments in the market, like more the established elite, etc., might probably kind of incline more towards a more face-to-face personal touch. But I don't think the current day professionals, the guys who are really busy at work, who are probably very time poor, and they want to spend more time with their families and friends, would probably really ask for more face-to-face offline conversation. I think digital selling definitely is here to stay.
Absolutely. And one piece of advice.
I think basically, if you haven't adopted, it's time to get on the bandwagon fast and start testing, learning, failing, obviously making mistakes and failing fast. And I think basically getting to that ideal, optimal point of how we can then settle and then maintain your kind of propensity towards more digital onboarding, digital prospecting. That's really a must for every organization, no doubt about that.
Absolutely. I love it. And thank you for your thoughts on the pendulum as well. I think you're right. I think, we've crossed the line and there's no looking back in many ways. But at the end of the day, if we stay customer focused, ultimately they'll tell us how they like to engage. And the data certainly suggests now that it's in a much more online, digital/hybrid environment, regardless of industry. Now, I wish we could keep the conversation going, guys. It's been a pleasure over the last 25 minutes or so. Excellent chat. Thank you for sharing all your thoughts. Unfortunately, we're going to have to bring it to a close, but it's been really insightful, and I'm sure the audience will have a lot of takeaways from your experiences as they go about their digital evolution. So don't be surprised if you get some new LinkedIn connection requests after the webinar. All right, well, with that, let's move on to the next part of the webinar, where we'll share some data that echoes a lot of the sentiments shared by Taranga and Anupam. So again, Taranga, Anupam, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it today.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you. Great being on the panel.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
All right, well, let's get to the trends. Thank you again to Anupam and Taranga for sharing their valuable insight. Now we'll take you on to some data and some research from LinkedIn to elaborate further on those comments shared by the two gentlemen. So while we saw, an acceleration towards digital in 2020, COVID also brought with it a range of challenges. I'm sure you'll all agree, both direct and indirect. You can see some examples here in the slides. Anything from an increased spend associated with business continuity planning and remote working practices to near zero interest rates and a steep rise in customer reliance on digital services. And in addition to that, as we heard earlier, there's the human element as well, needing to help our teams adjust to this new normal, whether it's around where they work or critically how they work to get things done. And so in many ways, COVID really added pressure on an industry that was already under threat of disruption from new market entrants, new customer expectations, new technologies, and so forth. And not surprisingly, from a sales perspective, it's forcing sellers to adjust their approach as well. So let's take a look at some of that also. Sellers have been forced to adapt to this changing landscape. If you look at the slides, starting from the left, the rise in digital. There's a focus on leveraging data much more effectively and adopting digital tools and integrating them into how sales, marketing, and customer success teams engage buyers who are becoming much more digitally savvy. Second, middle of the page, sellers are adapting their approach from in-person to virtual selling. Face-to-face meetings are still largely on hold around the world, so they've had to learn new skills and adjust their mindsets, as shared by Anupam and Turanga earlier. And lastly, the past year brought with it an increased level of market uncertainty, with decision makers switching jobs much more frequently and entire industries going through transformations. And as a result of all this, building strong relationships and keeping track of executive movements has never been more important. Sellers need to find new ways to engage prospects and customers alike. And in fact, according to LinkedIn research, there's already been a 53% increase in virtual client meetings this year as organizations adapt to new ways of working. In fact, we have some data that shows you just how much sellers and buyers are shifting their preference towards digital. In a recent LinkedIn study, more than 40% of sales leaders surveyed in India, Australia, and Singapore shared that they are adopting sales intelligence tools to boost their sales team's productivity. And I suspect that number is going to continue to increase. More than 57% of them are also using networking platforms like LinkedIn as a sales tool with the specific objective of shortening sales cycles and improving productivity. If we could all shorten sales cycles and increase productivity, I think we can all agree we'd all be better off. And on the buyer's side, they're also embracing this era of digital tools, with the majority at 59% of wealth management clients, according to EY, also stating that digital will be their preferred channel for receiving advice within the next few years. And so if you had any hesitancy before on whether or how much to invest in digital, hopefully some of this data from your peers will convince you otherwise. That said, not all sales professionals are equipped, or certainly were equipped with it last year, with the skills, the tools, the mindsets to engage customers digitally, certainly at the beginning of the pandemic. But you can see here that there was a dramatic increase in the attention sellers spent on adjusting to this new reality. Comparing 2019 to 2020, in fact, there was a 2.7x increase in time spent learning about inside sales and a more than 7-fold increase in time spent learning about social selling on the LinkedIn Learning platform. And this really suggests that many sellers are needing to fill the gap in their digital selling competencies as their financial institutions adopt more and more digital tools and solutions. But remember, again, investing in skill development is critical, but so is convincing them of the need and the opportunity, i.e. the mindsets. So next natural question is, what is the opportunity? Now, you might be wondering what your total addressable market is on a platform like LinkedIn. Can I really find and engage more leads through social networks? The short answer is yes. There are more than 9 million finance buyers or decision makers globally that sit in over 3 million companies on LinkedIn. And drilling into Asia Pacific, there are more than 1 million decision makers from over 368,000 companies. Now, to break it down even further into types of potential finance leads, we've broken it out on the right-hand side of this page. Here, we're defining corporate decision makers as CFOs of companies in any industry. High net worth individuals defined as VP or above and at least 10 years of experience, and institutional as director or above in the finance industry and in the finance function. And so again, in short, you can see that LinkedIn provides a very large captive audience of your target buyers. And so I'm sure the next question is, great, but how active are they? And so in terms of activity, both finance sellers and buyers in APAC have become even more active on LinkedIn since the pandemic started. Now, let me explain what you're looking at here on this page. On the left of the person sitting down, you can see some seller data. And to the right of the person, you can see buyer data. The light orange represents the year-on-year increase in sellers or buyers sharing content on LinkedIn. And the dark orange bars refer to the year-on-year increase in content posted. You can see that there was more than a 30% year-on-year increase in sellers and buyers sharing content over the last year, and an even higher percentage posting content on LinkedIn, which is great to see as leaders and sellers are looking to really lead with insights, build their thought leadership when it comes to engaging prospects and customers. This also gives sellers a great opportunity to engage with that content, not only to build their credibility, but to do it in a non-salesy fashion as well. And so, are these increases in activity from sellers and buyers connected in some way? The short answer, again, is yes. Hundreds of thousands of finance sellers in APAC are already using LinkedIn and Sales Navigator specifically to engage with buyers. You can see here that there are more than 16 million daily buyer-seller signals happening globally. Now, that's a global figure, but given that a third of our membership is based in Asia and the majority of our traffic comes from outside of North America, rest assured there's a lot of activity happening in region between buyers and sellers. And by the way, these signals that I'm talking about refer to messages, content interactions, connections made, profiles viewed, and so forth. And so based on all that data that I've just shared, I think a few things are clear. One, the opportunity is real. And secondly, finance sellers really need to adapt and embrace virtual selling. And in fact, I think many organizations need to adapt to borrow some of Anupam's points earlier around leadership and culture needing to be right as well. So I hope that was valuable. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Kenny for the next section, where he will share how to use LinkedIn and our sales solutions tools to really move ahead of the competition. Kenny, over to you.
Thanks, Marcus, for sharing all these great insights. My name is Kenny, and I'm a relationship manager here at LinkedIn Sales Solutions. In this segment, I'll be sharing with you how finance sales professionals like yourself can leverage on LinkedIn to move ahead of the competition. As the world's largest professional network, LinkedIn has over 740 million members globally. 200 million of them are based in APAC, and we're growing at a rapid speed of 2 new members per second. So this means that your customers have a high likelihood on being on LinkedIn. So we've been supporting sales organizations through strategic and execution-oriented support. So starting on the left of the page, LinkedIn Sales Insights empowers sales operations to create informed dynamic sales plans of their targeted territories. Then, sales reps will execute these sales plans seamlessly with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Now let's take a look at how Sales Navigator can help you accelerate your digital selling abilities. So financial institutions these days are trending and adopting a digital approach into their tech stack. And governments are supporting businesses with various subsidies and schemes. So the industry itself has become far more competitive than before. LinkedIn Sales Navigator addresses these challenges by empowering your sales teams to build credible customer relationships which leads to an increase in sales productivity. Essentially, there are 3 ways on how you can go about doing this. Firstly is to find and target the right prospects and accounts through advanced search capabilities. Second is to understand what your buyers care about and what matters to them most, capturing insights about them and their businesses. And lastly is to be engaging with them at the right moment with commonalities, for example, such as a mutual connection or insights which you have captured. So now let's take a deep dive into how these 3 core areas can increase your sales productivity. So beyond free LinkedIn, which everyone here is familiar with already, Sales Navigator allows sales teams to tap into the broader LinkedIn network to generate new leads and accounts. So with advanced filtering capabilities, sales reps just need to know the type of prospect or the type of company that they are going after. So for example, let's say you're looking for a CFO in the tech industry with at least 10 years of experience, or even companies that have an annual revenue of, let's say, $10 million and above. You'll be able to do that in a matter of seconds. Whether or not you're in new acquisitions or have an existing pool of customers to maintain, Sales Navigator would help you broaden your network as a sales professional. So looking for new to bank customers and keeping track of existing customers are equally as important for finance sales professionals. So I think one of the first approaches when it comes to initially qualifying leads is to really look at companies that fit your target criteria. So leveraging on Sales Navigator search parameters, we have about 30 plus of them. You can use them to very quickly obtain a list of accounts. So for example, let's say you're looking at companies that are based in APAC with an annual revenue of, let's say, $100 million and recently have a funding event. You'll be able to do it in a matter of clicks. Once you have shortlisted these companies, Sales Navigator provides you with automated alerts of your targeted accounts. So for example, let's say a senior leadership hire, or if there's a news mention, or if the company is hiring actively, you'll be alerted. So you can actually use these insights to help you make better informed decisions of your accounts. So I think right now you must be curious about the size of price in the region. Let's take a look. So over here, here's some data which I've obtained from Sales Navigator in just a couple of clicks. So this actually shows the potential opportunity out there. So starting on the left, we could see that there are over 500 companies in APAC that recently had a funding event. So what this means it's actually valuable insight to me, because we all know that funding events means that companies are actually raising money. So they will have actually a higher likelihood to respond to me for a finance-related discussion. Next, we could see that there's actually 8,000 companies in APAC that have an annual revenue of $100 million. So this allows me to really focus on high-value accounts as a sales rep. For reps that are targeting small and medium enterprises, there's actually over 2 million companies with 15 million employees working for them, which provides me with a ton of white space opportunities. Now, I know that's a lot of data, but as a sales rep, I now have visibility and clarity into which accounts I should be spending my time on and focusing on, and how to actually use these insights to move the needle in my deals. So for professionals in private and retail banking, you must be thinking how LinkedIn Sales Navigator can actually help you. Let's take a look. So it's very easy to find high net worth individuals using the same search capabilities which I shared earlier on. So in fact, there are 8 million high net worth individuals in this region, in India, ANZ, and Asia itself. In sales, I understand it's always very difficult to keep track of all our decision makers. So Sales Navigator allows me to keep an always-on engagement when it comes to real-time alerts. So basically, I could keep track of activities that my prospect are engaging with on LinkedIn. For example, let's say a career change, or if the prospect has recently posted something on LinkedIn. And these insights will actually help me to create a more personalized approach of engaging with my prospect. I think it's especially critical and crucial when it comes to targeting the mass affluent. So Sales Navigator also intelligently surfaces and provides me with new lead recommendations based on my search and profile interactions. So I can quickly find new high net worth individual leads on Sales Navigator. Some data to share. On average, we found that Sales Navigator users found 10 times more decision makers, and they made 5 times more connections as opposed to reps using free LinkedIn. So to provide you with a broader context, let's take a look at the untapped opportunity for the mass affluent across these sub-regions. So over here, we actually analyze how connected our wealth managers and private banking sales reps are with high net worth individuals. We actually concluded there's actually a huge amount of untapped opportunity across these sub-regions. So averaging across the sub-regions, there were actually more than 89% of mass affluent and high net worth individuals who are not yet connected with retail banking sales professionals. So this means that LinkedIn is definitely a great source for sales professionals to actually start tapping into this particular segment. At the bottom half of the page, these are actually some interesting industry insights to where these high net worth individuals actually belong to, allowing you to really deep dive into them. So once you found the right leads and companies that you're going after, the next step is to really understand the needs of your buyers and what matters to them. So Sales Navigator allows reps to have an extensive buyer knowledge approach, which you can action upon. You can keep track of your customers, stay updated to money in motion opportunities, and do research on your prospects. So all of this is done in one single platform itself. So being in sales, I think we all know that getting to a prospect at the right time is extremely important, because that actually makes a difference between progressing an opportunity and losing out to your competition. With Sales Navigator, these insights and alerts are actually automated, ensuring that you're only fed with the most important information. Understanding what your buyers care about is important as well. So especially when we talk about having a personalized approach when you do your outreach. So as you can see on the right of the page, these are actually 5 of the key insights that you can expect to receive from Sales Navigator. So whenever there's an interaction on LinkedIn from your customer, you'll be alerted. And this actually provides you a compelling reason to actually reach out to convert these insights into buyer intent signals. So let's say, for example, your customer gets mentioned in the news recently. It will provide you with a great conversation starter on a particular topic when you do your outreach. Okay, so now in the next portion, let's talk about engaging with your customers. So I think we can all agree that executives these days, they are actually very particular to whom they are connecting with on LinkedIn. So as a reputable sales professional, I think the last thing that you should be doing is to be sending random connection requests on LinkedIn. On Sales Navigator, there are a couple of ways that you can reach out to your potential prospect, either through a shared connection or via your company's combined network. So mutual connections, also known as your second degree connections on LinkedIn, are actually your best and easiest way to get an introduction as opposed to a cold outreach. With Sales Navigator, it also intelligently finds the best path to get to a prospect. So one of the features is that it allows you to really tap into the network of your organization for co-worker introductions. So even if you're not connected to your co-workers, you'll be able to tap onto their connections to make introductions. So these days, we all can agree that cold calling is no longer possible due to the remote work environment. So another feature on Sales Navigator is what we call in-mails. And in-mails are actually one of the most credible channels for sales professionals to directly contact to their prospects. The good thing about in-mails is you don't have to be connected to your prospect before sending him an in-mail, which actually works really well as you think about having that personalized outreach. Our internal data has shown that in-mails actually have a 3 times higher response rate as compared to a cold email. Sales reps will then be able to use in-mails to actually start more meaningful conversations and discussions about what they actually learned about their prospect in a very personalized and curated fashion. On the right of the page, sales professionals actually saw a 46% uplift with in-mails when they mention at least one commonality. So commonalities can be things like industry expertise, shared experiences, or even mutual connections. So another challenge that reps often face is to keep track of content which they have sent to their customers. So let's say if you send an attachment to your customer via email, it gets lost, and then you don't know if your customer has seen that or not. So Smart Links is actually a feature on Sales Navigator which allows sales reps to easily package content and documents into one link without leaving their workflow. And this link can be shared offline either through WhatsApp, emails, or various social media channels. And once your prospect opens your link, you can also track how they are engaging with your content And these insights are actually very valuable because you can use them to ascertain interest, personalize follow-ups, and also identify other stakeholders that are involved in the buyer circle. So before we wrap up the session and move on to Q&A, I would like to share some interesting data in terms of productivity gains that we see from Sales Navigator users in the financial services industry. So from a tactical stance, Sales Navigator users, they are actually making 2.5 times more searches, 6.1 times more profile views, and 3 times more connections as opposed to their peers using free LinkedIn. So this means that your target buyers and customers are increasingly active on LinkedIn, and it serves as a go-to source when it comes to generating leads and building pipelines for your sales teams. So what we've done, in fact, we have analyzed data from our financial services customers who actually sync their CRM with us. And we concluded on average, Sales Navigator users see a 18% uplift in their sales pipelines. They have 30% larger deal sizes, and 61% of revenues were actually influenced by Sales Navigator. So if you're a sales professional or sales leader in the financial space, I think there are a couple of questions that you can ask yourself. So first of all is, do you face challenges getting in more pipeline, improving win rates, or increasing deal sizes? If yes, consider these benefits that you can potentially stand to gain for your sales teams as it had for our customers. So over here, you can see that here's some of our banking customers who have equipped their sales teams with Sales Navigator and already started their digital selling journey. If you're keen to learn more how Sales Navigator can help you smash your sales goals, feel free to connect with us or click on the request free demo or contact us links on the webinar platform. Okay, great. Now we have come to our final section, Q&A of the webinar. Thanks everyone for staying all the way to the end. So I'll be facilitating the Q&A together with Marcus. We received a lot of questions so far, but in the interest of time, we can only go through about 4 to 5 of them. However, if we don't cover your question, don't worry. Our colleagues will be responding to you and typing some of the answers to you in the Q&A box. So the first question here, during this era of digitalization, we are getting more used to doing online presentations than in person. Anything you could share on how to keep the engagements high as in-person presentations?
Yeah, great question. I think it's one that we all kind of struggle with or have over the last year. I would probably say there's some fundamentals that are no different than an in-person presentation. I mean, you're going to want to know your audience. You're going to keep your presentation and your slides kind of relatively short, so no one wants the death by PowerPoint. But certainly some tips and tricks, I guess, was one, try to get everyone to turn their videos on as a step one. That always helps when you can see who you're talking to, and it makes it more engaging. But then try to break it up, use icebreakers, multiple speakers, any polling technology that you can use, make it fun, music, maybe preempt someone else to ask or answer some questions, and so make it as interactive as possible. It's kind of a test and learn. I think we're all on that right now, but anything you can drive that interactivity will certainly help.
That's a great point. And the second question here, I'm interested in getting my team to try out Sales Navigator. How do you ensure that Sales Navigator is a compliant business solution for bankers to find prospects and do businesses?
Yeah, an important question. I think we touched on this earlier in the Q&A in the fireside chat a little bit. So Sales Navigator itself is certainly compliant with all the data protection laws and regulations out there. So I think my advice would be more, speak internally, speak to communications, speak to marketing, speak to your social media team, speak to compliance, just to see if there's any corporate guidelines or tips that they have, just to make sure you're in line with kind of what the rules are internally. But at the end of the day, my easiest piece of advice would be just use common sense in terms of what you post, what you share, what you engage, and what you comment online. But yeah, make sure you're in line with whatever your unique policies might be internally.
Great point. Third question here. Could you share some examples of how your financial services clients use Sales Navigator to find new clients? And can you elaborate further that how this has benefited them?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it's not necessarily any different from other organizations in terms of how they try to capitalize on it. Again, LinkedIn, 740 million members today, with over 200 million in Asia Pacific. Fundamentally, they're trying to target more effectively, find decision makers, find target buyers or accounts that they want to get into. They're trying to capture insights on those individuals and those accounts. And then, of course, they're trying to engage with them. So really find, capture insights, engage are the fundamental use cases. In terms of what value they get out of that, we have some benchmark data we can share as follow-up, but really it's around how can we increase opportunities sourced? How can we get more opportunities? Map out the decision community or that decision tree more effectively as well. How can we get larger deal sizes? If you think about the average B2B deal, certainly these days with 8 or more decision makers involved in the process across 4 different functions, it's a great opportunity to map that out, engage them all individually, bring them together to get a much larger deal size rather than being overly reliant on one. So larger deal size is another one that we hear a lot. And then, of course, higher win rates. Ultimately, Sales Navigator, it's a productivity platform. And so it's here to help you do things faster, better, in a more targeted fashion. And so we hope to speed up your sales cycle and get quicker win rates as well.
Yeah, those were great points, Marcus. I think we still have time for one more question. So my company's leadership team is used to the old ways of doing things, such as cold calling leads or sending out cold emails. How can I convince them or my team to try out digital selling with Sales Navigator?
Yeah, well, have them contact us as a step one. Half joking, but there's a lot of data out there, and hopefully some of the stuff we shared today could help you in starting that conversation internally. I think Anupam as well, I think it was, that shared around the legacy mindsets. There's still a lot of that, and certainly varies a little bit industry to industry and organization to organization. But it's a journey. It takes time. You need to start having those conversations internally, and data usually helps to back that up. And so feel free to reach out to us if you want our help on that. But really, it's around starting to have those conversations, because you're going to want, as shared earlier, you're going to want the leadership and you want the culture to be right in the organization to really get this right. So, hopefully that helps answer that.
Yeah, great. So we have come to the end of the Q&A. Thanks everyone for participating and staying all the way to the end. I hope you have enjoyed this session and had some good takeaways. So as a very quick recap, I think we all can agree that many of you all are already familiar with LinkedIn itself, and the notion that your customers are getting increasingly active on LinkedIn, and also the competition in the industry is increasing. The best time to really embark on the digital selling journey is right now. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar.
Thank you from me as well, and look forward to connecting on LinkedIn. Have a great day.